Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to talk about the debt ceiling, and I'm going to be looking over at the other side of the screen here. So today is January 21st of 2023, and I know you guys need to be thinking about this quite a bit, okay? Now I'm going to be working on a couple other videos that are really kind of weird. I don't want to get into those right now, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Trust me, this is a good thing that we're going to talk about here with the debt ceiling. Now, I want to kind of give you a little bit of background, so I'm going to kind of read some of this stuff over here. The debt ceiling hits in billions of dollars in 1940 at 49 billion, okay? So they raise it and they raise it over the years. So let me arrow down here. And I'll kind of give you an idea. We hit into the trillions basically in the 80s. Now, that was when Reagan got into real troubles. And we started noticing that the interest rates started rising heavily. Now, prices of things weren't that high, so it wasn't as much of an issue with that too. So that's another point that kind of comes out there when people talk to me about well, interest rates in the 80s were high, yeah, but houses weren't that expensive in the same way. So it's not on the same kind of calculation, or even cars. My parents bought a car in 76, and I remember it was $5,000, and that was the most expensive car they ever spent for. Okay, so we move into 2008. Just think about this a little bit. The debt ceiling in June of 2008 is $10 trillion. Now, that's really fascinating because that's the end of the Bush era. Okay, now we move into Obama's era, and by the time he's basically out of office, we're at $19 trillion. Now, there were lots of issues where there's suspension of the time frames and there was some auto adjusting, but they actually always changed it. Okay, now these would be in session points. So when you're thinking about these dates, they would always happen in session. Okay, now I'll give you one example. In January 30th of 2012, it was at 16 trillion and went up by $2 trillion. 1 year later, they kind of suspended it, and then they really didn't change it, and they adjusted it for a while, but they really didn't play with it much. They kind of moved it up a little bit. They didn't really adjust a lot over the years. Now, we don't have a major change. Now, even in Trump's time frame, it's up at 19 trillion when Trump pretty much walks into office. And it's basically suspended kind of crazily later in the beginning of his 2017 year. It sets at 22 trillion and moves up $2 trillion in 2019. Now, and they don't even talk about it in 2020. Why don't they talk about it? It's because that's when Trump actually suspended the Fed and shoved them underneath the Treasury Department with the PPP loans back in March of 2020. They don't want to have this conversation with you. And suddenly you'll see this in July of 2021, the debt ceiling, we start talking about that. It's at $28 trillion. Now, it was just instantly moved up by $6 trillion, just out of the blue, out of the random blue. Now, at October, so only a little bit later, they're at 28 trillion. They move it up $480 billion. Now, we move over to the end of the year. Now, they're spending money like hand over fist, and this is when, idiot Joe is in office, right? And we have December 16th, 2021. So this is about when those guys the Congress is about ready to go home for Christmas, when they really don't deserve Christmas time anyway. It's at $31.4 trillion, okay? Or excuse me, it's 28.9 trillion. They push it to $2.5 trillion. Now, I just want you to understand, and the debt ceiling at that point is at 31.4, trillion. Now, to give you an idea of what 2.5 trillion, or even back in 2021, where they pushed it up 6 trillion. I mean, if you go back over time, I mean, most of the debt ceiling push-ups are 64 billion, 147, 175. I mean, even if you calculated all of those, I mean, over all those years, they never were up that high. I mean, calculated all together, they don't do this. This tells you that we're at a bankruptcy phase, and everyone knows it. Now, to give you an example of how crazy this whole thing is, let me fast forward to you in the Davos moronic stuff with WEF. So here's something else that happens. You got Al Idiot Gore, who flies around in his airplane, talks about climate moronic stuff. Okay, and he says that in the in the recent budget of $1.7 trillion. That is a fascinating number. Doesn't that sound like the 17th letter? Oh my goodness. That's so weird. Okay. So he says it's $396 billion, which is 23% of the budget to climate emergency issues. What? And the real big war, the U war that we talk about all the time, is maybe at 10% or something like that, in that range. So you're talking a third of the budget is to these cabal pet projects. What is going on? Now, little idiot Al wants to tell you that, and he intimates in a really interesting kind of speech, that it should be a lot higher than that. That his climate pet project is going to go a lot higher than that. What? I mean, he almost kind of feels like, this is a Scott point, it almost feels like a doubling effect. I mean, that's kind of how he kind of says it to someone. I mean, if he was saying it's going to be, $10 billion or more, when you talk about almost 400 billion, 10 billion isn't a big deal. But if you're talking about 100 billion or 200 or 400 billion, that's a big deal, right? I mean, that's a doubling effect, or 50%, 25, 50%, 100% more. Oh, wow, right? It's already at 23% of the budget when you guys and we can't afford eggs, and we can't afford, all of this other stuff. I mean, like, come on, guys. I mean, it's just getting stupid. Now, on the same time frame, we have to kind of tell you about what happened on this Thursday, the 19th. Now, here's the interesting thing. It's official National Popcorn Day. There's a prophetic woman who knows a lot about the QFS called Amy Seaver, and I really like this woman. I've kind of listened to her a bit, and Mel Carmine and I were just talking the other day, and boy, I would love to have Amy Seaver call me up here, give me a ring. So I was listening to her a little bit about this, and she was talking about the Popcorn Day. And it was recorded before, the Thursday. So I'm doing this after, so I get to have the easy way of having that information. Okay. Now, why, and people go, why aren't they freaking out about this? Okay, so we have $31.4 trillion hanging in the balance. If your budget is in the middle of this, meaning the budget for the $1.7 trillion budget, the president's, all the president's men, to quote a movie, don't want to move off of that point. Okay. Congress doesn't want to meet about it. Why? There's a reason. There's a reason. Guys, white hats are in control. The military's in control. This is all set for you. Okay? So they didn't want to meet together. Now, here's what actually idiot Yellen, I always love saying that, she's talking to Kevin McCarthy, and she's talking about the nuclear option. So she puts in a little thing in there, and she says, the civil servant retirement fund, and she's basically talking about a retirement fund, is not immediately required to be paid to beneficiaries. And she's talking about a debt issuance suspension period will begin on the 19th and last through the June 5th. And so people are going, oh, so we have an extension to June 5th. No, we don't. Here's the thing. The nuclear option that happens, and it always happens by the Treasury, and she has no control over Treasury. Don't worry about that. Steve Mnuchin has control over the Treasury, which in reality, it's our man Trump. Okay. Now, what do? What happens is the real nuclear option is that the Fed goes into default. Social Security payments, Medicare, Medicaid, disability, veteran stuff. All these payments, tax payments, all these things go bye-bye. And you guys should be freaking out. Now, I understand if you hear this and you're going, oh my God, the world's falling. Calm down for just a second. I look at this as an excitement point in time frame because I'm telling you, this should have gone by with an event of an EBS. Well, guess what? I believe we're so close it's not funny. Military's in control. I have told you over and over and over again that we needed to have the Fed bankrupted. We don't need to pay the debts. We need to legally bankrupt the Fed. We need to legally bankrupt the corporation. Guess what they just did? They put themselves into default, which puts themselves into, in essence, when you put yourself into default, you put yourself into foreclosure. That's what happens, okay? If I put myself into default, I put myself into foreclosure. And to put myself into foreclosure, I put myself at the legal mercy of the systems, okay? And all you're waiting for when that happens in that situation is you're waiting for the systems to happen. Okay, so let me give you an example. I remember when a patient tried to very illegally take me to court over a contract situation that was so wrong, it wasn't funny. And I was praying over this situation pretty heavily. And I mean, like 90 people were in the court, and I was going, I'm never getting out of here. I'm just freaking out about it, going, I'm just never going to get out of this circumstance. In the first 2 hours, she dismissed 1 million of these people, and I didn't understand what was going on. And this is 2009 or something like that, late 2009. And what it was a ton of these foreclosures. So what happens is the bankers, and it was 80 bankers there, and they'd show up, okay, I'm here for Joe Smith, and I'm the bank, XYZ Bank, and I'm trying to foreclose on this property. Here's the address. And they look over to the side and there's no one there, right? So if no one shows up, you get foreclosed on. You don't even get a choice on the matter. You don't even get you don't get any essence in there. You don't have any standing because you're not standing in the court. And boom, you're out. So it was boosh. I mean, she went through all but 5 cases or 4 cases. I mean, it was crazy. And it's because what happens is they needed to come to that foreclosure phase. So they were all in default, but they had to go to foreclosure. Now the point of foreclosure was illegalized, and so it was in full bankruptcy points in essence. Okay, now I know you're going to get all sideways with me, and well, that's not how it all works. I understand. I'm trying to give you a kind of just a basic breakdown because no one's ever bankrupted the Fed. I mean, how do you really take over the building? By the way, if you've ever watched Nancy Drew, at her really cool videos, there's no one at the Fed. There's no one at the IRS. My lawyer and my accountant can't get a hold of the idiots at the IRS or the Fed. There's no one, IRS. There's no one been there for a long time. There's no one, and this is why I don't believe in anyone in Congress or Senate or anyone else, because there's big old razor wires and there's white, fences all over the places, all over DC. This place is a ghost town, and no one wants to talk about it. There's actors and CGI everywhere. You guys don't get it. None of that stuff is real. I'm pointing over to the screen over here. None of that stuff is real. And this was one of the cool things. We needed them to go to a point of bankruptcy. And when we get to the point of bankruptcy, all of the debts, all of your debts of your credit cards, your bank loans of all types. I don't care if it's a credit union, or if it's a mortgage, or if it's a line of credit, or if it's a whatever it is, they all have to get filed with the who? The Fed. So with the Fed's inability to pay their own debts, by the way, they've been in the negative for more than a year and a half. I mean, the Fed can't even pay their own stuff. I mean, if you go look through the data, it's fascinating. They can't pay their own debts. They're in default. We're just forwarding the default, and they already have all the assets on all this other stuff on the books. We have to clear the books. That's what the QFS does. Whoosh, it washes the books out, and the debt ceiling is the key. We're so close, I can't explain how cool this is. So I'm just telling you, be calm. It's coming. There's a lot of cool things coming. So I promise you it's going to be good. So I really appreciate you guys. You can go to Dr. Scott Young if you want to kind of look for some of my books, my book called Revelations of the Red Pill. If you want to donate, that can be helpful to me as well. You want to go to my website, and you want to look at stuff, you can kind of see where the Dr. Scott, NESARA, Hope in the Last Days series with the YouTube channel here. Or if you want to do Telegram, you can see it up there too, and you can kind of get a lot more information. Okay, there's a lot of cool stuff out there, and we just want to help you here, and we want to give you lots of good information. So thanks so much.